Well, welcome back to the program. Sanctions on Russia were imposed almost a year or more ago, and with severe means have been levied on and on since then. Are these sanctions doing their job, however? We'll talk about their effectiveness with Jaanika Merilo. She's an advisor to the Minister of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. Ms. Merilo, thanks very much for joining us this morning. And now, before we talk about the sanctions on Russia, I wanted to ask you about your ministry, the Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine. This is a very interesting ministry that was formed. Could you tell us when was it formed, and what are the main goals of the ministry?
Good morning. Thank you for invitation. Well, ministry was established in 2019, and it is overseeing the digital transformation in all areas in the country, which means basically the e-services, that all the services should be available through the smartphone to citizen, all the bureaucracy corruption should be minimized through these e-solutions, that countries should have access to fast internet, the digital skills. So the ministry is overseeing basically all of the developments in digital. And it is really important also for President Zelensky. It was one of his pillars, the digital society. And now, for example, 18 million people are using the e-services through smartphone. And it is very important, especially that people are moving, they're dislocating, they might not have their documents with them. So we even have the e-passport, which is valid as well as paper passport to show wherever you are located. So it's really important also in the time of war to have this access to government services.
Certainly. So this ministry was created before the war broke out. And how has this conflict, this unfortunate conflict, affected the work being done, the work of digitization?
This has even speeded up all the processes, because actually it was created as soon as President Zelensky won the president election in 2019. So the dedicated minister, now deputy prime minister, was nominated. And the work started very fast before the war, but we had to even speed up in the time of the war, which means that the services should be implemented as fast as possible, because they will enable also the government to continue offering the services. But it's changed, of course. And for example, now we have the challenge to Starlink Ukraine, because to offer services, you need the constant connection. And for example, Ukraine is today the second most Starlink country in the world after the US. So the challenges are a little bit different, but I'm very happy we started before the war. We managed to create solutions, and we managed to connect the most needy services for people, as well as to adopt certain laws, like about clouds, for example, that government can store its information in the clouds, which means not depending on what's happening on data centers. So the basis was created before, yes.
But also brings up some issues with digital security, with cybersecurity. Now, what kind of measures has the ministry taken to safeguard the safety of all of this data?
I think it's also very interesting precedent what has happened in Ukraine is, yes, Ukraine is also the second most attacked country in the world after the US. And all these digital register services should be protected, of course. But Ukraine has called for help and support also from private sector, from private specialists, for international community. And for example, we created even the IT army, which is compiled of over 200,000 different specialists that are also supporting to keep the systems up, to do a small offensives even when needed. So we're not relying only on government. It's an amazing structure of where government is supported by private specialists, international community, and it has really helped.
Incredible. And the funding for this project, did it come solely from Ukrainian tax-paying funds, or are there other entities involved in the creation of this project?
It's not even financed by government, because in the time of the war, very many specialists want to help however they can, and by helping, by giving their or donating their skills, it's the best way to help. But of course, international companies as well have donated their time and skills. Of course, international funds, also from US, from EU, from Estonia, from different countries. So it's like a very interesting composition of everything, like government, private companies, specialists, and it's quite a coordination task. But Ukraine has managed very well. As you can see, systems are up and running.
Certainly, and I think the UN Development Program gave Ukraine a Digital Innovator of the Year award. It's
Yes, we're
incredible.
proud of that.
Yeah, it's incredible that Ukraine is able to achieve this, even during this terrible conflict that it's experiencing now. Just a final question. I know that digital ID, the concept itself, has been proposed in numerous countries, and in numerous places it has received quite a lot of opposition. Now, what is there or was there opposition to the idea of creating this digital identification system?
No, actually, in Ukraine, there was a very interesting experience that we could create everything from scratch without any heritage, without any big restrictions of bureaucracy. It was just believed it should be done because it makes sense, because it enables delivering services. And it was the same like in Estonia 20 years ago. Estonia is one of the top countries in digital. It's just some things need to be done because it completely makes sense. And you can always have a position, but then by the end of the day, you want people to receive the e-services based on their e-identity, also cross-border, also like in when you travel and so on. So some things just have to be done, and that makes sense.
There you go. All right. And now let's thank you very much for sharing all that information with us. And now let's move over to the sanctions on Russia. And let's start overall with the sanctions that are currently in place. Do you think they're working? And then let's think about the future. What is being planned, do you think, and what can be planned?
Overall, yes, they're starting to work. Starting because basically the most important sanctions were placed like in December. They're still coming because the price cap on oil was just introduced in December. The sanctions on all products will be just in February. The gas was just now, but we can already see that there is a certain impact because, for example, in December, the income from Russian oil fell by 17%, which means less income to government budget. But it's also important that it's still, it takes time, and it's just getting there because oil products is also a very important category in regards to proceeds. But there are also different kind of sanctions. There are like sanctions self-implemented by businesses that leave Russia, which is also important. They don't pay taxes anymore. It's a step back basically in development. There are also like sanctions in regards to technology, in regards to, for example, it's called airplane cannibalism, which means that you cannot even maintain your current like solutions. And for example, planes are taking spare parts for other planes because you don't have any new technology, any new spare parts. So it's only starting to show, but it's always like it should be faster. It should happen faster. For example, the price cap on oil should be lower. It's already trading much below the set $60. So there are many things to be done yet also.
Interesting. And apparently there are plans of introducing further sanctions. Obviously, the European Union as well as the United States are refusing to say what these sanctions might entail, because obviously the element of surprise is part of the sanctions. But what do you think? What do you think they might possibly be planning there?
Well, it's speculation about the 10th package that it will include the SWIFT, blocking the SWIFT for the next banks. It's also coming into force like the oil product sanctions. I hope very much that the price cap on oil will be lowered further because it's trading already lower. And we know that the biggest buyers like China, India, Turkey, they're buying at lower price. So it makes sense to decrease that also. It's been talk about sanctions on nuclear, which should be there already for a long time because as we can see the Russian trying to replace the Ukrainian nuclear stations and they're not under sanctions. It's quite surprising. And of course, personal sanctions. The list keeps on expanding because it's quite personal for the leaders making decisions that they don't live in this European comfort of their families anymore.
Yep, and apparently there's also discussion of including other countries like Belarus, for instance, and even perhaps Iran. What's your opinion on that?
Yes, definitely. They're participating in the war. And when you participate in terror, you're still part of the terror, which means, of course, it would have made sense a long time ago. And it's very painful to see how some European countries are like twisting and turning and saying that maybe sanctions should be removed, like, for example, Hungary and so on. So I think it should be more and faster. And of course, we understand that sanctions by itself will not end the war. It's not a silver bullet. But then again, the less income to the budget, the lower life quality for people, the lower quality for elite, Russian elite, it all all the small bits and pieces come together to a big thing that could change.
Well, let's hope. But unfortunately, with sanctions, these things do take time for the effects of the sanctions to show any signs. It does take time. And as you mentioned, the sanctions that were introduced last year, the effects of those sanctions are just beginning right now. Just a final quick question. There's also talk about confiscating Russian property abroad. What's your opinion on that, on the legality of that, and the plan to do it?
That would be a great precedent, actually, because some countries are saying that you cannot just confiscate, like this, let's say, assets of the private person, or entire governments. But then again, it's war, and it's like proved war criminals. It's proved financing of the war, which means I think it would be very fair. And for example, Estonia has said already that it wants to be the first government to confiscate the assets and to give it to rebuilding of Ukraine, which means that I don't believe in reparations from the Russian government, that Russia would be at certain point ready to pay the reparation. But I do believe in confiscating and giving it over, and it would be just fair because it still is hundreds of billions of dollars, which are so needed in Ukraine. And because Ukraine is like lacking half of the budget on a monthly basis and other donor governments have to finance, why not Russia, who is the reason for the war?
Certainly. All right, and let's end it on that note. Very good point. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please stay with us. I'll be back with more news at the top of the hour.